It was one of those cold mornings when the sky looked pale and heavy with clouds, as if it hadn't decided whether to snow or rain. In a small town tucked between quiet hills, a young mother hurried down a narrow street, her coat buttoned wrong and her hands red from the chill. She carried a worn music bag over one shoulder, and in the other hand she held a lunchbox with half a sandwich and a small apple. That was all she could manage that day. Her name was Lena, and life had not been easy for her. She lived in a tiny apartment with her son Noah, who was 7 years old and full of questions about everything. Lena used to dream of playing the piano on big stages when she was younger. She had studied music for years and had even won a few small competitions. But dreams have a way of fading when bills pile up and reality grows heavier. After her husband walked out on them years ago, Lena had no choice but to take whatever work she could find. For a while, she cleaned houses and waited tables, but music was the only thing that ever felt right in her hands. So when the community center offered her a small job teaching piano lessons to kids, she took it, even though the pay barely covered rent and food. Every morning she sent Noah to school and walked to the center. It wasn't much to look at, just an old building with peeling paint and a flickering light near the door. The piano inside was older than she was, with a few broken keys and scratches along the side. Still, it was her favorite place. When her fingers touched those keys, she felt something close to peace. That morning, she arrived early, before the children came. The place was quiet except for the hum of the heater trying to warm the air. She sat down at the piano, opened the lid, and took a deep breath. Her fingers began to move softly over the keys, playing a slow tune she had written long ago. It was a song about calm, about finding light even when the world felt dark. Her eyes closed for a moment as she played, and she almost forgot about the rent notice on her kitchen table and the grocery list she couldn't afford to finish. In that moment, there was only music. A small voice behind her said, "That sounds like a story." Lena turned and smiled. It was Noah standing there with his backpack. He had come running after her, saying he forgot to kiss her goodbye. She laughed, leaned down, and hugged him tight. "Go on now, or you'll be late for school," she said. He nodded, grinning, and ran back down the street. She watched him until he turned the corner. He was her reason for everything. As the morning went on, a few children arrived for their lessons. Most of them came from families who could barely afford classes, and Lena often let them pay later, or not at all. She just wanted them to feel what she once felt when she first learned to play. She believed music could make life better, even if just for a few moments. By noon, her hands ached a little, but she didn't mind. She ate her small lunch at the piano, a slice of bread and some tea. The sound of laughter filled the hallway from other rooms, and for a moment, it didn't feel like such a hard life. She didn't know then that her world was about to change in a way she could never imagine. That afternoon, while she was packing up her books, the door opened suddenly. A woman stepped in, tall, nervous, and well-dressed, though her face looked tired. She held the hand of a small girl who looked pale and frightened. The girl's eyes were wide and her hair was messy, as if she had been crying for hours. "Are you the piano teacher?" the woman asked softly. "Yes," Lena said, a little surprised. "Can I help you?" The woman hesitated. "This is my employer's daughter. Her name is Sophie. She's been through something difficult. She won't talk to anyone, not even her father. I thought maybe music could help." Lena's heart ached just looking at the child. Sophie didn't lift her eyes. She just held tightly to the woman's hand. Lena knelt beside her and smiled gently. "Hi, sweetheart," she said. "Do you like music?" There was no reply. The girl's lip trembled. "It's okay," Lena continued softly. "You don't have to say anything. You can just listen if you want." She guided the girl to sit near the piano. Sophie sat stiffly, her hands in her lap, eyes blank. The woman who had brought her stood near the door, unsure of what to do. Lena sat down at the piano again. She didn't try to talk. She simply began to play. The melody was quiet and smooth, like the way water moves over stones in a river. It filled the small room with warmth. The girl didn't move at first, but after a while Lena noticed her head tilt slightly toward the sound. Then, Sophie's shoulders relaxed, just a little. Her breathing slowed. The music seemed to reach her in a way words never could. Lena's fingers moved with more feeling now, as if she was telling the girl, "You're safe here, you can breathe." When the song ended, the girl looked up for the first time. There were still tears on her cheeks, but her eyes were softer now. "Do you want to try one key?" Lena asked gently. The girl hesitated, then reached out with one small finger and pressed a note. It rang through the room, bright, clear, and full of hope. Lena smiled. "That's beautiful," she whispered. The woman near the door quietly wiped her eyes. "Thank you," she said. She hasn't responded to anyone in weeks. Lena didn't know what to say. She just nodded. To her it was simple. Music could reach places nothing else could. After they left, she sat for a long time staring at the piano. Something about that little girl had touched her deeply. There was so much pain in her eyes, the kind that only time and kindness could heal. That night, after she put Noah to bed, Lena sat again at her small keyboard in the apartment. It wasn't as grand as the one at the center. Some keys stuck and the sound was tinny. But she played anyway, the same melody she had played for the girl. Her son stirred in his sleep, smiling as the notes floated through the tiny home. Lena smiled too. She didn't have much, just music, her boy, and a quiet hope that maybe tomorrow would be a little better. The next morning she arrived early again. The sky was brighter this time, with light slipping through the clouds. She opened the piano and began to play softly, almost as a prayer. She didn't expect anyone to listen. She played because she needed to. But across the street, inside a parked car with tinted windows, someone was listening. A man in a dark suit sat there, his face unreadable as he watched through the windshield. His eyes followed the window where Lena sat playing, her hair falling loosely as she leaned over the piano. He wasn't there by accident. Inside, Lena had no idea anyone was watching. She only felt the weight of another day ahead, the bills, the lessons, the endless balancing act of trying to be both mother and provider. But when she played, the worries faded. Music was her way of holding the world together. As the day went on, she found herself thinking about Sophie again. Would the girl come back? Would the music help her heal? She hoped so. Maybe that small connection could make a difference for both of them. That evening, after her lessons ended, she locked up and walked home slowly. The streetlights flickered on one by one and the town fell quiet. She passed a bakery and paused to look at the fresh loaves in the window, their golden crusts still steaming. She wanted to buy one for Noah, but the coins in her pocket weren't enough, so she smiled and walked on. When she reached home, Noah greeted her at the door, waving a crayon drawing. "It's you, Mommy," he said proudly. "Playing the piano," Lena laughed softly. "It's beautiful, sweetheart." She hung it on the wall with a piece of tape. Later, as he slept, she whispered a small prayer of thanks, not for money or comfort, but for strength, for another day, for the gift of music that still lived in her hands. She didn't know that her life was quietly being noticed, that somewhere someone who could change everything had already seen her kindness. All she knew was that she would keep going. She would keep playing, because sometimes, when the world feels too heavy, all you can do is find a song that carries you through. And in that small apartment, under the hum of an old heater, a poor lone mother played her heart into the night, unaware that her music had already begun to change more lives than she could ever imagine. The next few days passed quietly, but the little girl, Sophie, stayed in Lena's mind. She thought about her often while teaching, while cooking, even while walking to pick up Noah from school. There was something about the way that child looked at the piano, not with curiosity, but with something deeper, as if the music had reminded her of something she'd lost. On Thursday afternoon, when the last of the students left, Lena began to tidy up the music sheets scattered across the piano. The sun was setting through the tall windows, throwing soft orange light on the old wooden floor. That's when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned, and there they were, the same woman from before and the same small girl with quiet eyes. Lena smiled right away. "Hello again," she said softly. Sophie didn't say anything, but she wasn't hiding behind the woman this time. She walked slowly toward the piano and placed her small hand on it, as if greeting an old friend. "She's been asking about you," the woman said. "She wanted to come back." Lena's heart lifted. "I'm glad," she said. "Would you like to listen again, sweetheart?" Sophie nodded slightly. Lena sat down at the piano and began to play the same gentle song from before. The sound filled the room, slow, warm, almost like a lullaby. Sophie stood there for a moment, then climbed onto the bench beside her. Lena didn't stop playing. She just smiled and nodded, letting the girl sit close. After a while, she pointed to a single white key. "This one makes the sound of raindrops," she whispered. "Try it." Sophie hesitated, then pressed it softly. The sound was small, but it seemed to brighten her face. "That's perfect," Lena said. "Now this one sounds like the wind. Can you hear it?" The girl pressed another key, and for the first time a faint smile appeared on her lips. The woman by the door looked shocked, tears forming in her eyes. "She hasn't smiled in weeks," she whispered. Lena didn't answer. She just kept playing, building a soft rhythm, letting Sophie follow along one note at a time. There was no pressure, no instruction, only feeling. An hour passed before anyone noticed. The time slipped away like it didn't exist. When the lesson ended, the woman thanked Lena again and promised they'd return soon. Sophie gave a small wave before leaving. It wasn't much, but it was something. That night, as Lena walked home under the dim streetlights, she couldn't stop smiling. She felt light, almost proud. Maybe, she thought, she could help that little girl heal, even if just a bit. Life was still hard. There were unpaid bills, broken shoes, and nights when the fridge was nearly empty. But for the first time in a while, Lena felt like she was doing something that truly mattered. Over the next few weeks, Sophie began coming more often, sometimes twice a week. Each time she spoke a little more, sometimes only a few words, "Hello," or "Again," or "Please play that one." But it was progress. One day she brought a small picture with her. It was a drawing of a piano with two stick figures sitting at it, one big, one small. Underneath, in shaky handwriting, she had written "Me and You." Lena's eyes filled with tears when she saw it. She hugged the girl gently and said, "That's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." Sophie smiled shyly, her cheeks pink with pride. As weeks turned into months, their lessons became the highlight of both their lives. Lena noticed how Sophie slowly began to open up. She laughed sometimes, hummed along, even started learning simple songs. But there was something Lena didn't know. Each time they played, a small security camera mounted in the corner of the community center recorded everything. It was just part of the building's system, something Lena never paid attention to. She didn't realize someone on the other side of that camera was watching. One evening, as the lesson ended, the woman who always brought Sophie, her nanny, lingered for a moment. She seemed nervous. "Miss," she said quietly, "I just want you to know, her father has been watching the videos. He's very grateful." Lena blinked, confused. "Watching?" The nanny nodded. "The security footage. He saw how you helped her that first day. He said, 'No one has reached her like that.'" Lena felt her face warm. "Oh, I didn't do much," she said quickly. "The music did." The nanny smiled sadly. "You did more than you think." After they left, Lena sat in silence, staring at the piano. She wondered about the girl's father, who he was, what kind of man had a driver and a nanny but couldn't help his own child heal. But she also understood grief. Everyone carried it differently. At home, Noah was waiting with a small cup of instant noodles for dinner. "How was work, Mom?" he asked. "It was good," she said softly. "Really good." He nodded, slurping his noodles. "You're smiling," he said. "Did someone give you candy?" She laughed. "No, sweetheart. Just a little girl who's learning to play." He grinned. "You're the best piano teacher ever." Her heart melted. "Thank you, baby." The next afternoon, when Sophie came again, Lena decided to try something new. "Let's write our own song," she said. Sophie looked uncertain. "I don't know how." "That's okay," Lena said. "We'll make it together. You play one note and I'll follow." The girl pressed a single note. Lena added another. Then another. Soon they had a small melody. Soft, simple, but full of feeling. "We'll call it Sophie's song," Lena said with a smile. Sophie beamed. Outside the window, someone was watching again. The same man in the dark car. His eyes followed every movement, the way Lena leaned toward the child, the way the girl smiled for the first time in months. He watched quietly, his face hard to read, but his hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel. Inside the car, he turned off the small monitor showing the feed from the community center. He sat there in silence, remembering his late wife's laughter, her love for music, and how she used to play the piano for Sophie every night. The melody Lena had played sounded eerily similar to hers. It was as if fate had brought this stranger into their lives. Meanwhile, inside the center, Lena and Sophie continued to play, lost in their own small world. When the girl finally got tired, she leaned her head on Lena's shoulder. "Can you play that again?" she whispered. "Of course," Lena said softly. She played the same tune, slower this time, until the girl's eyes began to close. For a moment, it didn't feel like a lesson. It felt like family. When the nanny returned to pick her up, Sophie clung to Lena's hand. "Will you be here next time?" she asked quietly. "Always," Lena said. After they left, Lena sat alone for a long time. The piano keys were cool under her fingertips and her heart was full, but also heavy. She didn't know why, but she could feel that this was only the beginning of something much bigger. The next morning, the center's director called her into the office. "Lena," he said, looking nervous, "someone wants to speak with you about the piano lessons." "Did I do something wrong?" she asked quickly. No, he said. "Nothing like that. It's someone important." He handed her a piece of paper with a number and a short message written on it. "Thank you for what you've done for my daughter. Please meet me tomorrow evening." R.C. Lena frowned. She had no idea who R.C. was. The director shrugged. "Apparently he's a donor. Be polite." That night she could barely sleep. She told herself it was probably just a parent who wanted to thank her, maybe even offered to pay extra for the lessons. Still, her stomach twisted with nerves. The next evening she arrived at the place written on the note, a quiet cafe near the edge of town. The moment she walked in, she knew she didn't belong there. The walls were lined with paintings, the furniture polished and modern, and the smell of roasted coffee filled the air. A tall man in a dark coat stood up from one of the tables. "Miss Lena?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "Yes," he gestured for her to sit. His voice was calm but firm, the kind that carried quiet authority. His face looked tired, not from age but from something deeper, like the weight of years of worry. "I'm Sophie's father," he said simply. Lena froze for a moment.
"Oh, I didn't expect. I wanted to meet the woman who made my daughter smile again," he interrupted softly.
"You've done more for her in a few weeks than doctors and therapists have done in months." Lena didn't know what to say. "She's a wonderful child," she finally managed. "She just needed a little music." The man smiled faintly. "My wife used to say that. She played the piano too." His eyes softened for a moment, then turned distant. "Sophie stopped smiling when she died." Lena's chest tightened. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He nodded. "I don't believe in luck, Miss Lena, but I believe people meet for a reason. You've given my daughter something I couldn't." "Peace." She shook her head, embarrassed. "Please, I don't need thanks. I'm just glad she's okay." He looked at her for a long moment. "You're humble," he said. "That's rare." Outside, rain began to fall softly against the windows. He reached into his pocket and handed her a small envelope. "For your work, and for the piano lessons." Lena opened it. It was full of cash, far more than she had ever seen at once. She looked up quickly. "Sir, this is too much." "Take it," he said quietly. "And please keep teaching her. You're helping her heal." Lena hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Thank you." As she walked home in the rain, clutching the envelope, she didn't think of the money. She thought of Sophie's smile, of the sound of that single note the girl had played weeks ago, clear, bright, full of hope. She didn't know that the man who had just thanked her was not just wealthy. He was one of the most powerful businessmen in the city, someone whose next move would change both their lives forever. But for now, all Lena cared about was that somewhere, a little girl was learning to live again through music. And that was enough. A week passed quietly after the last lesson, but Lena could feel something changing around her. The air felt heavier, filled with small, silent shifts she couldn't explain. Maybe it was the way people at the community center smiled at her a bit more lately. Maybe it was the way Sophie's nanny seemed extra polite, as if carrying a secret she wasn't allowed to tell. Lena didn't think much of it. Her life was still the same. Morning walks to work, lessons with her students, and evenings spent cooking simple dinners for Noah. But inside, she felt lighter. Helping Sophie had filled her days with something meaningful. Every time she saw that little girl's eyes brighten, it reminded her why she had chosen music in the first place. One Thursday evening, just as she was finishing a lesson, the community center's director called her into his office. He was a kind man with a quiet voice who rarely looked serious, but that day he seemed nervous. "There's someone who wants to meet you," he said, adjusting his glasses. Lena frowned. "Who?" He smiled mysteriously. "You'll see." He said, "It's important." She followed him down the hall to the main lobby. The building was nearly empty, the sun already setting through the large windows. Standing near the door was a tall man in a dark coat, his back straight, his expression calm but unreadable. When he turned, Lena froze for a moment. His face was familiar. She had seen it in magazines before, on billboards, and once even in a newspaper article about one of the city's biggest companies. It was the kind of face you didn't expect to see in a small community center. "Good evening," the man said, his voice deep and steady. "You must be the piano teacher." Lena nodded, a bit flustered. "Yes, that's me. How can I help you?" "I'm Sophie's father," he said simply. Her breath caught. She hadn't expected that. "Oh," she said softly. "I didn't realize. I wanted to thank you," he said before she could finish. "My daughter hasn't smiled in months. I've tried doctors, therapists, even private tutors. Nothing worked. And then she met you." Lena felt her cheeks grow warm. "She's a special child," she said quietly. "She just needed a little time." The man nodded. "You did more than give her time. You gave her peace." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The sounds of the outside world seemed to fade, leaving only the soft hum of the heater. "Please," he continued, "let me do something for you in return." Lena shook her head quickly. "No, that's not necessary. I didn't do it for anything in return. I only wanted to help her." He smiled faintly. "You remind me of my wife. She used to say things like that." Lena lowered her gaze. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you," he said quietly. "It's been hard for both of us." Sophie was very close to her. He took a slow breath, then reached into his coat and handed her a small envelope. "This is for your time and your kindness. Please accept it." Lena opened it slightly and saw money, far more than she could ever earn in months of teaching. She quickly closed it and shook her head. "I can't take this." "Please," he said gently. "It's not payment. It's gratitude." She hesitated, unsure of what to say. There was sincerity in his voice, but accepting something like this felt strange. Still, refusing again might have seemed unkind. "All right," she said softly. "Thank you." He smiled, a genuine, warm smile that softened his serious face. "I'm glad we met," he said. "I hope you'll continue teaching her. She looks forward to every lesson." "I will," Lena said. "As long as she keeps coming, I'll be here." He nodded, then glanced at his watch. "I have to go, but you'll hear from me soon." When he left, the room felt suddenly emptier. Lena stood there for a moment, still trying to process what had just happened. She tucked the envelope carefully into her bag, her hands trembling slightly. That night, she didn't tell Noah about it. She didn't know how to explain meeting someone so powerful and kind at the same time. She just made dinner, helped him with his homework, and tried to push the thought aside, but it stayed with her. The next morning, something unusual happened. When she arrived at the center, a delivery truck was parked outside. Two men were carefully unloading a brand new upright piano, shiny, elegant, with polished black wood. "Excuse me," Lena said, stepping closer. There must be some mistake. One of the men looked at his clipboard. No mistake, ma'am. It's for the community center, gift from a Mr. Collins. Lena blinked. Mr. Collins? The name clicked in her mind. Sophie's father. She pressed her hand over her mouth, overwhelmed. The director came out moments later, equally surprised. He donated this, he said, his voice full of awe. Do you know how much this costs? Lena didn't answer. She just stared at the piano, feeling tears sting her eyes. When she sat down to play it later that day, the sound filled the whole building, rich, deep, and beautiful. It was like the room had found its voice again. That afternoon, Sophie arrived for her lesson. Her eyes widened when she saw the new piano. It's beautiful, she whispered. Lena smiled. It is, isn't it? Daddy said he bought it for you, the girl said proudly. He said you deserve the best piano in the world. Lena laughed softly. He's very kind. But you know what? The best piano is the one that makes you want to play, and this one makes me very happy. They spent the rest of the afternoon playing together, their laughter mixing with the music. For the first time, Sophie sang along to a tune while Lena played. Her small voice filled the air, clear and sweet. After class, the nanny came over and said quietly, Her father would like to invite you to dinner. He said you've become part of their family in a way. Lena hesitated. Oh, I don't know. He really insists, the nanny said gently. It would mean a lot to him. Lena nodded slowly. All right then, just once. The following evening, a sleek black car arrived in front of her small apartment. Noah's eyes grew wide when he saw it. Wow, Mom, is that for us? Lena smiled nervously. Just for tonight, sweetheart. Someone's inviting us to dinner. Are we going to a fancy place? Something like that, she said, brushing his hair gently. The car drove them through the city, past bright lights and tall buildings, until they reached a grand gate that opened silently. Inside was a beautiful house surrounded by gardens and fountains that glimmered under the lights. When they stepped out, Sophie came running from the door, smiling widely. You came, she said, hugging Lena tightly. Behind her stood her father, watching with a quiet smile. He looked different this time, not like the serious businessman from before, but softer, more at peace. Welcome, he said warmly. I'm glad you could make it. The dinner was simple but elegant. They talked mostly about music, about Sophie's progress, about Noah's school. The children laughed together while the adults shared quiet stories. At one point, he looked at Lena and said, You know, I used to believe money could solve anything, but it couldn't fix my daughter's heart. You did that. Lena smiled softly. I just gave her a way to express herself. The music did the rest. He nodded. Still, I'm grateful. You've reminded me what kindness looks like. After dinner, they gathered in the music room. There was a grand piano there, even larger than the one at the center. Sophie and Noah sat beside each other as Lena began to play a duet. The melody floated through the house like a gentle wave. The man stood near the doorway, his eyes glistening as he watched. He wasn't just seeing a piano teacher. He was seeing hope come back into his home. When the song ended, the children clapped and laughed. That was wonderful, he said quietly. You've brought joy back to this house. Lena looked at him, unsure how to respond. Thank you for saying that. He smiled, then said, I'd like to make you an offer. She blinked. An offer? Yes, he said calmly. I'd like to help you build something. Your own music school, maybe. A place where more children like Sophie can learn and heal through music. I can provide the funding. You provide the heart. Lena stared at him, stunned. I don't know what to say. Say yes, he said softly. Because what you have shouldn't stay in one room. It deserves to reach more people. Tears welled in her eyes. This is too much. I'm just a teacher. He shook his head. No. You're someone who changes lives. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But in that moment, sitting in a house filled with laughter and music, Lena felt something she hadn't felt in years. Possibility. That night, as the car drove her and Noah home, he leaned against her shoulder and whispered, "Mom, that was the best night ever." She smiled, looking out the window at the stars. It really was. What she didn't realize was that this was only the beginning. The kindness she had given without expecting anything in return was coming back to her in ways she could never imagine, and somewhere deep down, she knew that her life, and Sophie's, was about to change forever. The next few weeks went by in a blur. Lena tried to focus on her lessons and her usual routines, but her mind kept returning to what he had said that night. The offer still echoed in her head like a melody she couldn't stop hearing. A music school. Her own school. It was a dream she had buried years ago when life became more about survival than ambition. But now, someone had seen that spark in her again. She didn't know whether to be excited or afraid. Part of her wanted to believe it was possible, but another part whispered that dreams like that weren't meant for people like her. A few days later, she received a call from his assistant, asking her to meet at an office building downtown. She hesitated before agreeing, feeling nervous as she took the bus the next morning. Her worn-out coat and faded shoes looked out of place among the glass towers and polished floors. When she arrived, the receptionist smiled warmly and guided her to a large conference room. There, the man she'd met before, Sophie's father, was waiting with a gentle smile. "I'm glad you came," he said, standing to greet her. "Please have a seat." "Thank you," she said softly, still unsure of why she was there. He gestured toward some papers on the table. "I've had my team put together a plan. Nothing complicated, just an idea of what your school could look like. We can start small, maybe right here in the city. A place where children can learn music even if their families can't afford it." Lena looked at the papers. They were full of designs, simple, beautiful sketches of classrooms, practice rooms, even a small stage for performances. It all looked too perfect, like something from someone else's life. "This is incredible," she whispered. "But I can't accept this." "It's too much," he shook his head. "You're not accepting charity. You're accepting a chance to do more good. You've already proven what your music can do. Let's help more people hear it." His words carried a kind of quiet conviction that made it hard to refuse. He wasn't trying to impress her or make her feel small. He just believed in what she did, and that was something she hadn't felt from anyone in years. "I don't even know where to start," she admitted. He smiled. "That's why I have people who do. You just focus on what you do best, teaching and inspiring. Leave the rest to us." When she left the office that day, her heart was pounding. She didn't dare tell anyone yet, not even Noah, because part of her was afraid it would all disappear if she spoke it out loud. But it didn't disappear. 2 weeks later, she stood in front of a small building on the edge of town. It was old, dusty, and in need of repairs. But when she stepped inside, she could already hear the echoes of music that hadn't been played yet. "This is where it will begin," he said, walking beside her. "We'll fix it up, make it bright again." Lena looked around the empty room and felt a lump form in her throat. "I can't believe this is happening," he smiled. "Believe it. You've earned this." Over the next month, the building transformed. Workers painted the walls, repaired the floors, and brought in instruments: pianos, violins, guitars, and drums. Every detail was carefully chosen. There were shelves for sheet music, colorful posters of composers, and even a small library filled with books about music and creativity. Lena came every day, helping wherever she could, dusting, arranging chairs, and watching as her dream took shape before her eyes. She didn't want to just be a name on the door. She wanted to be part of every piece of it. One afternoon, Sophie and Noah came to visit the nearly finished space. The children ran around excitedly, their laughter echoing off the new walls. "Look, Mom," Noah shouted. "They even have drums." Lena laughed. "Maybe you can learn to play them." Sophie smiled shyly and touched the keys of one of the pianos. "Can I have lessons here too?" "Of course," Lena said warmly. "You'll be my very first student." When the opening day finally came, the little building was filled with life. Parents brought their children, curious neighbors peeked in, and a few reporters came to take pictures. There was music in every corner, children trying new instruments, soft piano melodies in the background, and laughter everywhere. Lena stood near the entrance, greeting people as they walked in. She wore a simple dress and a nervous smile. She had been awake half the night, worrying that something would go wrong. But everything went beautifully. When she looked across the room, she saw him standing quietly in the back, watching. He wasn't trying to take credit or be noticed. He was just smiling, proud. Later that evening, when everyone had left, Lena found herself alone in the main room. The light from the windows cast a soft glow on the floor. She sat at one of the pianos and began to play, a gentle tune, full of gratitude. She didn't realize he had walked back inside until she heard his footsteps. "That's beautiful," he said quietly. She looked up, a little embarrassed. "I was just thinking about what? How strange life is," she said softly. "A few months ago, I was just trying to keep my old piano from falling apart. And now you've built something that will outlive you," he said. "Something that will keep giving." She smiled faintly. "You give me too much credit." He shook his head. "No, you give yourself too little." They sat in silence for a while, just listening to the faint hum of the city outside. "I want you to know," he said after a moment, "that this place isn't just a gift. It's a partnership. Whatever happens here, I'll support it. You don't have to do this alone anymore." Lena's eyes softened. "That means more than you know." "Good," he said with a small smile. "Because I mean it." In the following weeks, the school became a second home, not just for Lena, but for many others. Children who had once been too shy to speak now sang loudly. Teenagers who had been lost in anger or sadness found comfort in music. Even parents came to listen, sitting quietly at the back of the room as if remembering something they had forgotten. Lena poured her heart into every lesson. She stayed late to help students practice, often bringing Noah along, who would read or draw quietly in a corner. Sometimes Sophie would come too, sitting beside her father as they watched the students play. It was during one of those evenings that Lena noticed how relaxed he looked. The deep lines on his face had softened. He laughed more easily now, especially when Sophie played. It was as if he too was healing in his own way. One evening, as the last students left, he approached her with a thoughtful expression. "You know," he said, "this place isn't just changing the children. It's changing me too," Lena smiled. "Music does that to people." "No," he said gently. "You do." She blushed slightly, unsure how to respond. He continued, "When my wife passed, I stopped believing there was still kindness in the world. I thought money could fill the silence she left behind, but it never did. Then I met you, and I saw that kindness still exists." Lena looked down at the piano keys. "I just try to do what I can. Life has been hard for me too, but music helped me survive. Now I want to give that to others." He nodded slowly. "And you're doing exactly that." For a moment their eyes met. It wasn't romantic, it was something deeper. A quiet understanding between two people who had both lost something precious and were slowly finding hope again. The days that followed were filled with small miracles. A boy who had refused to speak started humming. A teenage girl who had been withdrawn for months wrote her first song. Every day brought new laughter, new music, and new stories. Lena often found herself standing by the window after class, watching the sunset while the children's laughter faded down the street. It filled her heart in a way she hadn't felt in years. Sometimes, when she turned, she would find him standing in the doorway, smiling quietly as if he too couldn't quite believe how far they'd come. And every evening before she locked up, she would play that same soft melody, the one she played for Sophie the first day they met. It had become their song now, the sound that had started everything. As the notes floated through the room, she knew deep down that life had finally come full circle. She had once played to calm a broken child. Now she played to celebrate healing, hers, Sophie's, and perhaps even his. And though she didn't know what the future held, she no longer feared it. Because she had learned something beautiful and simple. When kindness meets music, it can build miracles out of the quietest hearts. A year passed since the music school first opened its doors, and every corner of it now seemed alive with laughter and song. The walls that once echoed emptiness now carried the sound of piano notes, children's laughter, and the gentle rhythm of dreams being reborn. Lena could hardly believe how much had changed in such a short time. She walked down the hallway one morning, smiling as she peeked into the classrooms. A little boy was learning to play the flute, his cheeks puffed with effort. Two sisters were clapping along to a rhythm game, their voices bright and cheerful. At the end of the hall, Sophie was sitting at a piano, her small fingers gliding gracefully across the keys. The same shy child who once refused to speak now played with confidence and joy. Her music had a lightness to it, like sunshine filtering through leaves. When she finished, Lena clapped softly. "That was beautiful, Sophie. You've come so far." Sophie turned and smiled, her eyes shining. "It's because of you," she said. "You taught me how to listen." Lena walked over and gently touched her shoulder. "You taught yourself how to be brave. I just helped you find the music that was already inside." Sophie grinned proudly, and for a moment Lena felt her throat tighten with emotion. Watching this little girl blossom was the greatest reward she could ever have asked for. Later that afternoon, as the last class ended, Lena sat in her small office surrounded by notes and student schedules. She still worked long hours, but now she didn't feel tired the way she used to. It was a good kind of exhaustion, the kind that came from doing something that truly mattered. There was a knock on the door. "Come in," she said, glancing up. It was Sophie's father. He stepped inside holding a folder in one hand and a calm, familiar smile on his face. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said. "Not at all," Lena replied. "Please have a seat." He sat down and placed the folder on the desk. "I wanted to show you something." Inside were photos of a large building, bright, modern, and filled with open spaces. "What's this?" Lena asked, curious. "Our second branch," he said simply. "I told you this was just the beginning." Lena's eyes widened. "You're opening another one?" "We are," he said, smiling. "You and I, together." She looked at the photos again, hardly believing it. "I don't—" After the recital, everyone gathered in the courtyard outside. There were fairy lights strung across the trees, and the air smelled of warm cocoa and happiness. Children laughed, parents talked, and for the first time in years, Lena felt truly at peace as she stood under the lights, watching Sophie and Noah run around together. She felt someone step beside her. "You've built something beautiful," he said quietly. She smiled. "We built it," he nodded. "I'll never forget the first time I saw you at that old piano, trying to calm her down. You looked so calm even though you had no idea who was watching." Lena laughed softly. "If I had known, I probably would have played something better." He chuckled. "No, you played exactly what she needed to hear. What I needed to hear, too." They stood there for a while, not needing to say much. The sound of laughter and music filled the night like a warm blanket. After a few moments, he said quietly, "You've changed more than just my daughter's life, you know." Lena turned to him. "What do you mean?" He smiled gently. "You reminded me what really matters. I used to think success was about money and power. Now I know it's about moments like this, music, kindness, love. You showed me that." Lena looked away, feeling her eyes sting. "I just wanted to help one little girl. I never thought it would turn into all this." "That's the thing about kindness," he said softly. "You never know how far it will reach." Later that night, after everyone had gone home, Lena stayed behind to tidy up. The lights were dim and the stage was quiet again. She walked over to the piano and sat down, letting her fingers rest on the keys. She began to play the same melody she had played for Sophie that very first day, slow, gentle, full of warmth. As she played, memories filled her mind. The tiny classroom, the old broken piano, Sophie's frightened eyes, the laughter that had returned, the dream that had grown. Halfway through the song, she heard a soft sound behind her. Turning slightly, she saw him standing there again, watching quietly. "I thought everyone had left," she said. "I couldn't go," he replied. "Not yet." He walked closer, stopping beside her. For a moment, neither spoke. There was only the music, soft, steady, and familiar. When she finished, he said, "You know, every time I hear that song, it reminds me that hope can come from the most unexpected places." Lena smiled gently. "It reminds me that no one is ever really alone." He nodded. "You're right. And thanks to you, I don't feel alone anymore." They shared a quiet moment, filled not with grand words but with mutual understanding. Two people who had both been broken once, now whole in their own ways because of music, and because of kindness. When Lena finally locked the doors that night and stepped outside, the city was peaceful. The streets were quiet, the air cool and crisp. Noah was waiting by the car, half asleep on the seat. She brushed his hair softly and whispered, "Come on, sweetheart. Time to go home." As the car drove through the sleeping city, Lena looked out the window and smiled. The world seemed softer now, warmer somehow. She knew she would face challenges again. Life was never perfect. But this time, she wasn't afraid. She had learned something that would stay with her forever. Sometimes, a small act of kindness can change everything. A single song can heal a broken heart. And even in the darkest moments, a melody can guide you back to the light. When they reached home, she tucked Noah into bed and sat for a while by the window. The moonlight spilled across the floor, and she could almost hear the faint echo of piano notes drifting through the night. She closed her eyes, smiled to herself, and whispered, "Thank you." Because in the end, she hadn't just taught music, she had taught love, courage, and hope. And that, she realized, was the greatest song she would ever play.